I think many of us are aware that the Arctic has been, in the last years, a very peaceful area of the globe. But since that time, of course, a whole raft of issues have emerged, not least amongst them climate change and all its consequences in the sense of the melting ice in the high north, which releases many resources like oil and gas to be exploited, other mineral resources, which changes the patterns of migrating fish stocks. These are all opportunities, but they are also challenges to be properly managed.
We're witnessing a really unprecedented surge of public interest in the Arctic today. I've been following Arctic affairs for the last 35 years, and I think there hasn't been anything like the current level of public interest in that time. And so the questions arise, is this a development that is alarming, or is it really more alarmist? What can we do about this? A fair amount of the current excitement is actually exaggerated, and some real amount of it is somewhat ill-informed. But still, the public interest that's been generated in Arctic issues in recent times creates an opportunity for us to review the existing governance system, the existing management arrangement, and to think about how we might adjust, revise, redevelop the arrangements we have in place now.
The Arctic Circle is north in Norway and leaves a lot of Norway north of that circle. And we should, of course, not forget that most people live their lives on shore. And I think any policy will have to deal with people. And the objective of my governance policy is really to focus on high north policies in order to improve living conditions for people in the north, work, culture, education, knowledge, that whole perspective. And especially because Norway's high north focus is on the ocean, whereas Sweden and Finland, our near neighbors, have inland focus when they focus on the north. And it's bringing all this together which is fascinating. Do we need an Arctic legal order and Arctic policies? And the answer is clearly yes. Very short. We will not be able to address future challenges without a rule-based response and without concerted, effective action that builds on specific scientific data and responsible and precautionary approach. I think these are fundamental pillars of Norwegian government's policy. Knowledge-based management policies. We have long experience when it comes to fish, and also when we now deal with energy.
The European Union has already made significant steps in all areas relevant to the Arctic. The European Union plays an outstanding role in global efforts with wide impact in the Arctic. The European Community is party to all conventions and protocols of fundamental importance for the Arctic. Some of them have been mentioned today. It actively promotes the implementations of obligations under them. And many of these obligations have been transposed into community law.
The lack of systematic data about environmental issues in the Arctic, which still remains a major challenge for us and for everybody else who wants to assess the Arctic issues, in our case, in order to bring it into the development of European environmental policies to make those more robust, to trace the ecological footprint of Europe outside the Arctic, outside Europe and ensure that the Arctic is taken into consideration when policies are made. That is the main reasons behind our long-standing engagement in the Arctic.
For us, it's so important that that you, the EU, that you join us, that in international cooperation on Arctic issues. Admittedly, we who are the Arctic peoples sometimes worry that the increasing awareness of the Arctic region does not always correspond with a factual understanding and respect for the terms of living in the Arctic. As an example, Greenland is quite worried of the control and trade ban initiative taken by the Commission on sealing and whaling. We in Greenland consider sustainable sealing and whaling as an exercise of our traditional and cultural rights, and we do appeal to the EU and the international community to stand by its own standards and respect our right to sustainable sealing and whaling.
Finland has been actively involved in promoting Arctic cooperation from the very start. The first steps towards environmental cooperation in the Arctic were taken already towards the end of the Cold War. It did, however, take some time before the importance of this work was recognized on a global level. Today, as you all well know, the Arctic is one of the major issues in the global debate on climate change. We have heard it here many times.
So the Arctic 100 years ago took 3 years for a drift. The Arctic today takes only 1 year for a drift. And I want to develop this theme. The Arctic is not only changing, but it's changing fast. And where we thought maybe something would happen in 3 years, now it only happens in 1 year. And this acceleration, this rate of time that things happen, is consistent throughout the Arctic. And I submit that it extends to everything else we do in terms of planning and governance as well. If we think we have 3 years until some event in the Arctic, we're going to be surprised and it's going to happen in only a year.
The European Parliament is involved in the Arctic I'll focus in 2 ways. Firstly, through the European Union policies, and this is the European Neighbourhood Policy as well the Northern Dimension Policy, and secondly, the European Parliament is also active through the work of the delegation that I'm chairing in the moment. The European Neighbourhood Policy, or NEP as it is known, it is aiming not only to strengthen the bilateral relations between the European Union and the neighbourhood states, but also to bring for cooperation between the neighbouring states and ultimately to create a network of cooperation between those states. It was reflected in the resolution the European Parliament prepared for the NEP, and the other very important topic in this resolution is that we wanted, and it is written there, that we have to pay the needed special attention to the countries of the European continent which are not members of the European Union, and amongst them are also Iceland, Norway, and other countries which are part of our delegation.